I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s fire service where everything was about command presence. Back in those days, it was all about who could talk the loudest with the most confidence. And sometimes it's those people that just command the room being labeled with command presence.
There is a mandate that our company officers and our command structure exhibits the qualities and characteristics of command presence. We know it when we see it, and then we know it when we see people lacking it. And we naturally just create this disassociation between people who have command presence and people that don't. And it's important, if I'm being generous, 15% of the time. The rest of the time, we need company officers, chief officers that have command presence, but more importantly, that they're stronger in the domain of command resonance. And command resonance doesn't take away from command presence, it amplifies it. Actually, it makes you more effective. Command resonance is developed and built in every interaction in the firehouse, in City Hall, in the back of the bay, around the kitchen table. It's developed in the moments before an emergency occurs.
Welcome to Ops Talk, Westminster Fire Department's operational training podcast, where we share ideas and knowledge through honest conversations, highlighting the people who do the work. I'm Eric Linnenburger, Deputy Chief of Operations. While built as a resource for our members, we invite the greater fire service and the community to be part of the conversation. What we share reflects our current approach under present conditions. Always follow your department's procedures and guidelines. Welcome to the Ops Talk podcast. I'm Deputy Chief Eric Linnenburger, and I'm so glad you joined us today. I have really been looking forward to this one. Our guest today is Fire Chief Kris Blume. Kris is the Fire Chief of the Meridian, Idaho Fire Department. He has over 2 decades of fire service experience and is the author of Carry the Fire, the Crucible of Leadership in the Fire Service. He's a graduate of the National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program and now an instructor in the National Fire Academy in that same program. Kris has written extensively for industry publications, probably seen his name all over the place. He speaks and teaches across the country, and truly one of the most important forward-thinking leaders and voices in our U.S. Fire Service today. In today's episode, we're going to dive into officer development through the lens of his book, Carry the Fire. We're going to try to break big ideas into practical steps that can help current and future fire service leaders lead with clarity, authenticity, and purpose. Kris Blume, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on.
Hey, Chief, I'm thrilled to be here. Very, very excited. Thank you for the opportunity.
As I shared with you, I absolutely loved your book. I think it's so pertinent for our fire service. As we were talking earlier, I think it's so scalable as well. It's applicable to that fire chief, maybe new in the role, maybe revisiting the role, all the way down to the firefighter. It's maybe aspiring for leadership and everything in between. I love the way that it's laid out. We're going to get into it a lot today. I just gave the bio. I basically read it from the back of your book, and I know there's so much more to you than that professional bio. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got here, what inspired you for leadership, and just how you ended up as the fire chief in Meridian, Idaho.
Oh, great question. Great place to start. And so much like everybody's career path in the fire service, it started with the idea, the vision, the dream of actually wearing the turnout gear and being a servant to the community that you live in. And I've always been sort of drawn to that, the idea of not so much servant leadership, but being a servant and making people's lives better. And at basically the boiled down conclusion of the fire services, that's exactly what we're there for. We show up and things get better. And so being a part of that was very appealing to me. And so I was very fortunate. I was in Tucson. I was a recent graduate from the University of Arizona and looking to put meaning and purpose to my life, and really just fell in love with the professionalism that I saw as a civilian with the Tucson Fire Department, and was very fortunate to test, to go through their training academy and to graduate and spend the next 21 years growing and developing in a metro-sized department. And, it's very easy to get lost in a metro-size agency. And what I mean by that is if you're not looking for opportunities, if you're not looking to enhance your own leadership or your skills on the fire ground and in the firehouse, you will find exactly what you're looking for. And so if you're not looking for much, you won't grow much. And it was very interesting because about 17 years in, and I was a battalion chief at this point, I really didn't know where I was going. And, I had just completed the executive fire officer program. And, it was very interesting because at the end of that program, the way it used to be, kind of went around the classroom and answered the question, what's next? And I was panicked because quite frankly, I had no idea what I was going to do next. I didn't have my eye on a fire chief job. I didn't really know where, I was going. I didn't know what was left for me. And so I was very drawn to coming home. And when I say coming home, Idaho is home for me. It's where my grandparents, my aunts, uncles on both sides of my family are. Kind of grew up here tangentially, throughout my formative years, and really wanted to get back to Idaho. And then, like I said, just kind of having that rut, being stuck in at the battalion chief rank of kind of trying to figure out, well, what's next. And I recognized that I could kind of just have thrown it into cruise control and spent the next 5, 10, 15 years in that role. But I had gas in the tank. I have a lot of gas in the tank, and that gas is what I want to, or wanted to, and continue to want to invest back in the profession that gave me everything as an adult. It gave me purpose. It gave me meaning. It gave me a paycheck. It afforded me an opportunity to do a lot of great things, help a lot of people. And so that's what really started making me say, hey, you know something? I think I can do this. And it's terrifying. It's comfortable to sit in the position you're in. It's terrifying to look to think that if you get the tiger by the tail, it it's terrifying. And I kind of thrive on that a little bit. And was very thrilled, excited to move back home, and to be the fire chief of the city of Meridian, Idaho. It's probably, Eric, you indicated, teach at the National Fire Academy, and I think everybody in this profession should make it a point, not just once, maybe not even twice, but as many times as you can carve out to go to the National Fire Academy, because inevitably I think people come back with gratitude and perspective. And in doing that, what I've recognized is that the Meridian Fire Department is not the JV team. It is one of. I would put this agency up against any department in the country. Their passion, their professionalism, their culture of training, their commitment to being excellent, the pride. It's amazing, and I couldn't be more proud to have members that feel that way about the profession. It makes my job a little bit easier.
Well said. And I feel the exact same way about the department that I'm with. And, the Westminster Fire Department, very similar size to Meridian. And we're kind of in that, it's kind of an identity thing, right? Where are we the bigger urban department, or are we the small department? We're kind of that, we refer to ourselves as the medium sized department all the time. And what I love right now is people like you that are out in the industry showing that some of our smaller departments have things to share. And so do the large departments. But for a long time, I felt like it was only those large departments that had a voice. I just love that you're out here sharing that message, and so proud of your department. And I'd love to hear a little perspective on that move from that larger fire department you were with Tucson before to Meridian. Was there a culture shock there, or anything that surprised you?
Um, that's a great question, Eric. It's kind of interesting because every firehouse has a kitchen table, and every firehouse, it's weird. I think, and I know that this is true. You can walk into any firehouse across the country, and it's the same profession, and you'll find the same characters. You'll find the same people. The challenge is generating and creating credibility in the role. When you leave the comfort and the warm blanket of an agency that you've been with for 21 years, they know what they're getting with you. They know exactly what to expect. They know how you're going to operate on the fire ground, in City Hall, in the firehouses. and then tearing away that safety blanket and going takes a lot of jet fuel because you're coming in and you're the new guy again. You may have more brass on your collar, but you do need to demonstrate and create credibility in the role. You can't stand on past failures or successes for that matter. You have to create um, a sense of vulnerability and ownership. And I know that those maybe sound like dissimilar, but they're very much similar. And
Mhm.
and
Sure.
and what I mean by that is you can't just hide in the fire chief's office. You can't just hide behind the desk. You have to get some desk distance, and you need to immerse yourself in the culture of the agency you're in. And it's not for the sake of changing it. It's for the sake of understanding it because they were doing, in most cases, they were doing fine before you got there. So it's how do you understand and recognize where the agency is at that moment in time and where you see the opportunities are for them to just get better. And that's the challenge.
I feel like there's a component of that regardless of what position you're stepping into new, whether it's within your own organization or another organization, whether you're stepping into the first line company officer role or you're stepping into a fire chief position. Obviously, you've got all eyes on you as the fire chief. You're trying to figure out the politics. You're playing a really big game there, but there's a piece of that at every level. Would you agree?
100%. And Eric, I'm glad that you just said it the way that you said it because um you don't realize it until you're in those positions, but the target, once you've ascended up, your target gets bigger. Every now everybody's got a really clear view of the target, and there are people that are looking to see if they can make you stumble, take a shot at you, and that's okay. And that is okay. You just have to have the temperament and give them grace and understanding because it's funny. I was doing a captain's testing this past week for this department. And just so proud of the applicants that were coming through the chief's interview. But one of them said, the easiest job you'll ever have is the one you've never done. And, I mean, I remember coming up through the ranks, being a probationary firefighter and looking at, the red fire helmet and, man, how do they do that job? Just there was this awe and this respect because it was demonstrated. You had good captains and bad captains or people that you wished you could get a little bit more from. And then you felt the same way at the battalion chief rank. But for some reason, there becomes this disconnect administratively. Well, what is the chief doing? They don't do anything. My God, if you only knew, and Eric, you've got your neck deep in it because you are in those roles. If they only understood the sacrifices, the late nights, the early mornings, the pancake breakfast, the meetings with council, the meetings with mayors and elected officials, working at the national level, lobbying and advocating for what we do as fire chiefs. Again, easiest job I ever had was when I, was not being a fire chief because I had no idea the amount of commitment and exhaustion that comes with the responsibility if you're doing it right with the responsibility of being a fire chief and certainly that transcends. Eric, you're the ops chief, is that correct for
Correct.
West?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
and I want to give you my perspective on that position. Um, God bless you for doing it because the operations chief is a grinder for people. You are the doormat, and you're the doormat for everything that comes off the fire chief's desk, and you're the doormat for everything that comes up from the operations side, and you are the fulcrum in that. And it is challenging and it is a grinder. And people, if you're able to do that job for 5 years, well done. That is a grinder of a position.
It, it it is. I'm finding that out. It's also very rewarding. You don't get maybe the tangible rewards. You don't see it right away. It's not instant gratification, but you see it down the road. It's totally worth it. I wouldn't have done it without the right support, without the right leadership group, but then without
Yeah.
the people worth doing it for. And it's totally worth it. But man, you're right. Things come at you in a different way, but you're expected to be strategic. But yet, a lot of what you're dealing with is the you're putting out those daily fires. As soon as you start to look ahead and try to be innovative and strategic, something comes at you that you have to deal with. It's the fires every day. But I appreciate you saying that. And in the end, we do it, for the right reasons. We do it for the people we serve and for our communities. And but with that, we all still need our own mentors. We all still need our own support system. And I think that this episode, the fact that we've got you on here is a testament to relationships. Our friend and colleague Susie Zavala was the one that introduced you and I at FDIC a couple years ago, and we've been able to maintain this relationship, and I really appreciate that. Do you have some key relationships that you still fall back on for that support? Because life does get a little bit lonely at the top.
Yeah, Eric, you're absolutely right. The friend group, y- you really don't have a lot of friends, and you shouldn't in the agency, and I mean that in the context of, you have a very difficult job, but what you definitely need is leveraging relationships from outside your agency, whether it's locally, nationally, or otherwise. And you're absolutely right. I have in my phone, and it's funny I talked about the EFO, the Executive Fire Officer Program. I still have text threads that are 8 years. We're still connecting, and the beautiful thing about that is watching people progress through their career, and in leveraging those relationships, you can struggle, or you don't have to struggle alone, right? I mean, there are people that have been there, done that, and it may not be the way that you need to do something, but it's offering perspective. And so I would definitely say that having a network of people that you can pick up the phone and they feel the same about you, that they can, hey man, here's something I'm dealing with. I just have no idea. And it's inevitable, because I've seen, in this executive role, their leadership and my own leadership grow, because instead of just calling and saying, hey, I got this problem, how would you handle it? How would you fix it? Yeah, we'll do that. But then inevitably the conversation goes, how are you doing? How's your family? You know what? And showing an authentic, genuine care for the people, those bonds are unbreakable, and that's part of one of the reasons that I think that utilizing, the National Fire Academy, as well as you mentioned FDIC, all of those opportunities to go and get face time with peers and mentors. I mean, that's to the point, Eric. Like that's how I ended up with your phone number in my phone, was through that networking opportunity of FDIC. So yeah, the mentors and peer relationships are crucial as you grow through your career, and certainly the friend network becomes more specific, more targeted, more focused. And I think that that's important as well.
And I encourage all leaders, even our first line company officers, to get out of their own silos and get outside of your own departments and find those people that you can bounce stuff off of, uh, that have clean perspective, or an open perspective, but maybe their own experiences. So get out of your own networks and push the limits a little bit. We've got one of our lieutenants he's working within the IAFC, and he's starting a mentor group right now. And I think it's something that's really missed in our industry. It's a missing piece. We know from the Executive Fire Officer Program what we have there, and I think that is that key piece, going from kind of mid-level leadership to executive level leadership. But not everyone can go to the Executive Fire Officer Program. So any opportunity we have to build those networks, I think, is fantastic. So look for those people out there and build those relationships.
Yeah, 100%.
I'd love to get into the book a little bit. Like I said, really enjoyed this thing. I have just demolished this book. I believe you set it up so that it could be read cover to cover, but didn't necessarily need to be read cover to cover. I chose to just read it front to back because I'm kind of OCD like that. But then I found myself referring back to it over and over again. So it's laid out kind of, in a sense, textbook style, but every chapter stands on its own. I'd love to focus a lot of our conversation as an officer development tool, especially for like that first and second line company officer. I think it's, in my opinion, is the most important and influential position in the fire service. I mean, I think that we underestimate it sometimes, but that first line company officer has more direct influence over our organizations than any of us chief officers do. They can make or break an organization. I really like the stuff about mission driven culture. And I think it's just a really, really good place to start. And I think sometimes we talk, culture's kicked around a lot these days, and sometimes it's kicked around in a cliche kind of way. And I don't think people really drill down into what that actually means and how we all impact culture. It's easy to point at that position that we've never done before, like you mentioned. It's easy to point at that fire chief and say that they need to create this culture. And there's a lot of talk and a lot of fingers pointed right now towards leadership, and some of it rightfully so. We need to up our game. But I think what people don't get right, and please correct me if you feel otherwise, is that we're talking leadership at all levels. We're not just talking the fire chief's office or the battalion chiefs. We're talking about even the first level company officer as part of that leadership conversation and how much influence they have. Can you talk about mission-driven culture and how we should be striving for that kind of culture rather than kind of our traditional, fire service culture maybe that we've known in the past?
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about. So yeah, the mission-driven culture, I think, is the pathway forward for the fire service. And Eric, you hit the nail on the head in the context of, the frontline supervisor of the organization. It's, so goes the captain, so goes the department or the lieutenant. And that's absolutely true. They have more power than they probably realize, because we place them in charge. They're the tip of the spear. They're making command level decisions that impact the community and put at risk the lives of the crew that's been assigned to them. We put them in a 6, 8, $10 million fire station with a $2 million piece of apparatus, and hey, go forth and do good things. And I think that and I made this analogy, or asked the question. It's like, from the position of a paramedic, how long does it take if you enter the career track or the position of a paramedic? How long from start until the day you're allowed to touch patients and be, lead patient care, right? And most people would say 18 to 24 months, right? Okay, that's fair. But for many departments, my own included, it's like, we put these company officers through an officer development program in a week. And then you take a test in the following weeks. And depending on how you performed in the 1 week class and the 1 day or 2 day testing, you end up sitting front right seat with a red fire helmet and that $2 million apparatus and the $8 and $10 million fire station, making all of these very important organizational decisions. And so there's a paradox there. We recognize that, a bad paramedic can kill a patient, unintentionally. But how much are we investing in our company officers to make good, values-driven, mission-focused decisions? And it cannot happen. I mean, I refuse to believe that it can happen in a week. And so what we have to do is we have to create organizationally. I think, it shouldn't be a one and done. I'm not saying you have to retest for your captain's position or your lieutenant's position or your battalion chief's position, but we owe it to those people to continue to provide developmental opportunities that allow them to continue to grow in their role through the duration of their career. Because, the finish line is not the promotion. That's really the starting line for that individual. But then the other issue is, and as it relates to mission-driven culture, is, very specifically, people want to master, the SOPs, the SOGs, city policies, departmental policies, the contract labor agreement, whatever's in there. They want to master all of those things for the testing process. And that's a very neat and tidy little box. And the problem then becomes they have mastery of that little box of information, but we expect them to operate in this massive vacuum, this circle around that box. And the analogy I make in the question that I ask to company officers is, to drive that point home, is how many times have what you were dispatched on matched what you showed up to? And that's the dilemma. And everybody's like, well, it never happens. That's exactly right. So how can we train you for this tiny box and then expect you to go out and operate in this domain of unknowable unknowns and variables and all of the things that influence a decision-making model. And at the crossroads of that is mission-driven culture. And mission-driven culture is predicated on leaders' intent ruling the day, and that intent being support by a task, a purpose, and an end state. And that is to say, task, what are we doing? Purpose, why are we doing it? And the end state is, what is the desired outcome? Now, this is where it gets tricky. Outcomes. It's not whether it's a desired outcome or an adverse outcome, but what was the intent when you made the decision? What were you trying to affect? How are your actions consistent with the organization's mission, vision, and values, or mission, vision, and guiding principles? And if you have good mastery of that, what then happens is we end up having people that make good decisions, and they make good decisions under stress. Good decisions in the context of them being supported by the organization's mission, vision, and organizational values. Now, not every outcome is going to be amazing, but if then the leader stands behind their decision. Here's what I was trying to do when I made this decision, when my crew did X, Y, or Z. And then it's incumbent upon our organization to recognize the gray area, the fog of war that they were operating in. And I mean, unless somebody did something immoral, illegal, unethical, or completely egregious, it becomes, it should be an organizational priority to support the member in having to make a very difficult decision with limited or no information to try and affect a positive outcome. And I think that, like I said, I have a personal story about that. I know, Eric, you heard that up at the Colorado Fire Chiefs Leadership. But I think that is the paralysis that we have to break through for our company officers and our battalion chiefs. It's like, no, you're going to be supported if your actions, the intent behind your actions, was values driven, mission focused, and we can support that. And in any way, I think that doesn't make people reckless. I think it makes them confident, and it makes them bold in their willingness to make decisions, because back to the point, the company officer, that's where the rubber meets the road. And if you have people who would get analysis paralysis, or, well, that's not my job, or I don't want to get in trouble, that's unacceptable. I need you to make decisions. I want you to make good decisions, but more importantly, I need you to make decisions. And that's where mission-driven culture sort of elevates itself as being the path and the way forward in the fire service.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, we're all looking for that policy or that guidebook to show us the way. And this is the guidebook for that. We can't write a policy for everything. We have a responsibility as leaders to create the policies that we need to create, but there's also a two-way street there. And I've tell my people all the time, well, first, they get tired of hearing about me just harping about our world being gray, and there's nuance in everything, and that you need to be thinking and working in that gray area. But I tell them all the time that I will support you all day long in deviating from that SOG or breaking that policy if you have reason to do it. But if you don't know that you're actually breaking that policy, then that's a problem, right? And so it's a two-way street. There's an accountability piece to it, and then we're going to trust you to go out and do your job. I'd love for you to share your push the gate example, if you don't mind, with the group, because I think it brings it back, especially to that company officer, that first level supervisor that's got some really difficult things, some decisions that they're making right now. We're up in the office, and a lot of times we have a little bit of time to work through some of our more strategic decisions. When you're on the spot with seconds to spare and lives at risk, you're doing some tough stuff up there, or out there on the streets. And I'd love for you to share that story. I think it really just you know
Yeah.
sets this home.
No, I appreciate that, and I'll just backtrack real quick. You hit on something that I think is really important. Rules based, and it's funny. I ask the question of people sometimes when I'm teaching classes or whatever. It's do you want to be a member of an organization that's rules based or values based? And look, we can say rules based or mission driven, culture based. And inevitably, everybody's like, "Oh, I want to be a values based organization." It's like, okay. Well, so here's the thing. If you want to be a rules-based organization, I'm going to have everybody take your company officer badge off, put it on the table, and come up here and pick your stack of manuals up, because those manuals are going to tell you when you do, what you do, how you do, and why you do it. And this includes tying your shoes, using the restroom, when you can sit in the recliner, how to make the pot of coffee. And again, so if you want to be values based, I need you to know what the rules are, but apply organizational values to decisions and not run back to, and this is on us, Eric, is administratively, it's not running back to the manuals and saying, they violated policy X, Y, and Z. So that's where organizational trust in mission driven culture comes, where if an individual is taking ownership of a decision and an action that they took, and they are telling you this is consistent with our organization's mission, vision, values, you don't have to go to the rule book. But unfortunately, people who have one foot in values, wanting to be a values, mission driven culture, and one foot into I want to be a rules based organization, the first time that they're confronted with a question of why did you do what you did, they'll pull the policy out and say, well, I didn't violate this policy. And they'll try and navigate the minutia, the language that says, well, technically I didn't do this, that, or the other thing. This is the important piece. Everybody in the organization has to be on board with this for it to work. And that becomes very challenging. So to drive the point, and I'll use my example. And again, this is where I really became the student of mission-driven culture. And it's unfortunate that I was exposed to the concept of mission-driven culture after this event. But, I was a battalion chief, and I had been a battalion chief for about 5 years. I was in Battalion 1 in Tucson Fire Department. And we had a full alarm come into Battalion 1. And as we're all pulling out of the station, we could see the header. I mean, it was impressive. And so we knew we were going to work. We knew we had a working job. And so we were, all the notifications were made and this, that, and the other. And so now we start. Battalion 1 houses, 2 engine companies, a truck company, medic unit. So the caravan pulls out of the station, code 3 heading there. And we get to, as on our way to that call, the blood pressure's going up, pulse rates increasing, reading the MDT, the dispatcher's coming back a little bit. You can sense the stress in their voice. We have a known victim. They can hear the victim screaming in the background. The neighbor's got a green line on the fire. This individual is not ambulatory, so they're stuck in their house. And it's like, okay, we this is what we're here for. So as we pull up to the complex, these are condominiums. It was a very nice gated condominium complex, and the ladder truck was first at the gate, and I see the engineer trying to punch in the code, and the code's not working, and then I see the captain come out and hustle over to the gate. They're trying to work on it, and I'm sitting in my battalion chief rig at about a 90-degree angle. I can see him. And I have the mic sitting on my thigh, and I just kept saying out loud in my mind, but not over the radio, push the gate, guys. Come on. Push the damn gate. Like, we got to get in there. And it was interesting because I didn't think much about it at the time, but we were there for 96 seconds. I went back and looked at the call notes, and You know, ultimately they got the gate open and made it to the scene. And I mean, it was one of the most impressive. I mean, we had ventilation, combination attack. I mean, everything that you could have, a coordinated interior fire attack with the rescue at the priority, VES, everything that you would want to see and hear your team do was being done. And, I mean, like I said, you've heard me say this, I have the images burned in my mind's eye of our medics working the code in the front yard. And unfortunately, the patient didn't make it. And when we got back to the station and we were doing a hot wash, there's the station's a bigger station, battalion once there's 25, 30 people in the day room. And we were kind of going around and, people were really hard on themselves, this, that, and the other same thing. And, the cowardly battalion chief, me, was sitting there listening to all of this. And I finally realized, I was like, you failed them. You did not do your job. And my job was to tell that captain to push the gate, to intentionally damage that truck, intentionally destroy that gate. And I didn't do it. And like I said, it wasn't the gate that was in the way, it was me. And I told him, I said, listen, that was my decision to make, and I didn't make it. I didn't give you the opportunity to do your job. And I was like, that'll never happen again. And th- because that's where it all kind of came together. And then I sat there and beat myself up over and over, and rightfully so. Why didn't I make that decision? And what it came down to, this is not an indictment on the Tucson Fire Department. This is how I felt. It's not how it would have been, but it's how I felt. I felt that, I knew that fire headquarters, the command staff was listening to the radio. That's what they do. There's a working fire. They want to hear it. And to hear Chief Blume come across the radio and tell him to destroy a gate and damage I didn't want the ridicule. I didn't want the scrutiny. I didn't want to get in trouble. Well, you know, chicken coops are filled with it. And that's what that decision was. And it's like, I should have felt empowered. I should have felt that that wasn't going to be an okay decision to make. And, consequences are real. And there's somebody not with us today because, I don't want to take, the responsibility is that, I was in command and I had an opportunity to make a decision and I didn't. And so after that, I was like, man, there's got to be a way through this. And I was just very fortunate. I was doing a battalion chiefs assessment center for San Diego Fire Department, and the chief there at the time, Brian Fennessy, he was the first person I heard utter the words mission driven culture, and he was very clear with the assessor pool that says, hey, listen, we're trying to do something special here, and it's mission driven culture. And he explained all the tenets, and he said, if one of these applicants make a decision that violates policy, that he said, I'm going to be okay with that. And I want you as an assessor to be okay with that, because here's what we're driving toward. Here's what we're striving toward. And holy crap, the light bulb came on. My pen was flying. I was taking notes. I talked with him afterward. I said, this is what we need to do. And, so then I leave Tucson, I get to Meridian, and I, out of the gate, we will become a mission-driven culture. And again, that comes with a lot of skepticism. Hey, we got this new chief. He's wanting to do this. He's going to hang us out to dry. Just wait, you watch and see. And so and again, I say rightfully so. There's a lot of dogma and past history and practice in the fire service in general about what happens when you intentionally damage or destroy a piece of equipment, not intentionally in a bad way, but when damage or destruction occurs, okay, you're going to get suspension, you're going to get written reprimand. In fact, the captain, the crew, everybody on that crew is going to take paper. So, coming in, it really required an investment in trying to demonstrate what this is and what this looks like. And, I never told anybody in Meridian, out of probably shame, when I got here, about the push the gate situation. And I kid you not, this was the most, we were well on our path toward mission driven culture, but what needed to happen was we needed a captain to make a high stakes decision with ambiguous information,
Mhm.
and then we needed to support that captain's decision. And it happened again almost 3 years to the date of the story from Tucson. We had a brilliant, amazing engine captain show up to a confirmed code arrest, uh, whatever, code blue code arrest, CPR in progress. It was witnessed, and they showed up to the resident or the neighborhood, and there was a gate, and they sat there and maybe tinkered with it for a minimal amount of time, and the captain said, "Get through this thing." And they did. They pushed through the gate, busted the windshield, pinstriped the rig, tore a mirror off. I mean, they did some impressive amount of damage. But what was then able to happen is the captain was able to put his crew on scene, put hands on the patient, and give that patient the best opportunity for an outcome, because at the end of the day, we're here for them. And if we're not willing to support a captain's decision to put his crew on that patient to affect a positive outcome, what are we here for? Damage to the equipment, damage to the gate, Days of Thunder, right? Rubbing is racing, and not to be just flippant about the whole thing, but that we should expect that. Use the tools, use the resource that this city has provided you for them. I mean, again, the outcome, going back to the tenets of mission-driven culture, the outcome was amazing. The patient, they got ROSC on scene. The patient walked out of the hospital 5 days later. They're still with us. They're getting days. They were given days or years back now, and that's that company officer's responsibility. So he does damage, destroys the gate. Patient walks out. Outcome is positive, but his intent was what needed to be recognized. And I had my deputy chief of operations. I said, seize this moment. We need to send out a memo to the entire department. We need to detail what he did and why he did it, and give praise to him and his crew for making a mission-driven decision. And it's in recognizing that and not disciplining it in the context of don't do that again. It's like, what could we do better in the future? These become the questions. Thank you for making a decision. We appreciate what your intent was, and the outcome you were pursuing was righteous. That's what we're here for, and empowering our people to do that. And so in that one instance, we started to build the credibility that it's like, okay, this is a real thing here. We're going to be supported. And has that been abused? Nope. I can tell you hands down, like that's the one big example, but it's also transcends to, we have a departmental policy that says you don't pick up people and give them a ride home or whatever. But then I had an engine company that was driving down a road, and it was about November, and it's cold in Idaho in November, and it was raining, not snowing, and this person was walking in the rain and they were wet, and the company officer pulled up and said, "Hey, do you need a ride?" And they're like, "Oh can I?" They put them in the engine, and they drove them 2 blocks to their house. And, they reported it to their battalion chief, and I ended up hearing about it. I was like, no, you're getting an award for that. Like, that's what we are here to serve this community, and we want to serve them excellently. And when you recognize need and you don't address it, now I have a problem. And so that, again, the policy be damned, it was the right thing to do. It supported the mission of the agency. So, the examples are many, but having people be willing to make that decision is what's important.
Well, what a great story. And I have heard that one before. I get chills every single time you tell it, because I think it just drives home the point. And I love what you said there at the end, that when you asked, do we have a problem with this now? Are people busting through gates every time they get to a gated community? No. We do the right things up front to hire the right people and train them the right way. And they're going to make good decisions. And in the end, that's still a tough decision to make for that officer. Leadership on the Line is required reading in the EFO program. We talk all over the place in there about how dangerous leadership is. And And it is because we're making tough decisions every day, and I think it's at all levels, and we're going to think those things through. We also have a lot of pride in the fire service, and sometimes it crosses over to ego, but maybe that's the time where ego is okay because we want to do the right things, right? We're going to make the right decisions for ourselves, and we're going to make the right decisions for our crews and for our organization. And so, just love that story, and I think it's a good time then to segue into one of my other favorite parts of the book when you talk about command presence versus command resonance. So again, talk about another dogma type of thing in the fire service, right? And I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s fire service where everything was about command presence. And I don't think that's to take away from the importance of command presence on an emergency scene, but I think our leaders now need to it's bigger than that. And I think that we got it all wrong. Again, maybe I'm totally wrong here in my interpretation, but I think back in those days it was all about who could talk the loudest, who could talk with the most confidence and make the decisions. And sometimes it's those people that just command the room that are the ones that are being labeled with command presence. I would love for you to get into command resonance a little bit. This is one of those areas that I guess I've always just intrinsically known, but I've
Mhm.
never been able to put words on it myself. And I think this is the future of the fire service right here.
Yeah, Eric, I appreciate you saying that, and I did take a bit of a leap, well, coining the term command resonance because I didn't know how that was going to land, and fortunately, Firehouse Magazine ran the article that sort of allowed me to present that as an idea, and you hit on the big points, and I think that what's important to recognize is there is a mandate that our company officers and our command structure exhibits the qualities and characteristics of command presence. And to kind of elaborate or maybe just to define that, it is very much a intangible or ethereal smoky term because nobody's able to necessarily say, that's command presence. We know it when we see it, and then we know it when we see people lacking it. And we naturally just create this disassociation between people who have command presence and people that don't. And I'd go so far as to say, I'd worked with a organization called IO Solutions. They're fantastic at doing promotional processes for fire service agencies. So I was on tour with them basically and went all across the country. And in every testing process at that lieutenant, captain, battalion chief level, one of the criteria, the grading criteria is did they have or did they exhibit or command presence? It was always spelled out, command presence. And it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's important. And it's important, maybe, if I'm being generous, 15% of the time. The rest of the time, we need company officers, chief officers that have command presence, but more importantly, that they're stronger in the domain of command resonance. And command resonance doesn't take away from command presence, it amplifies it. Actually, it makes you more effective. And command resonance is developed and built in every interaction in the firehouse and city hall, in the back of the bay, around the kitchen table. It's developed in the moments before an emergency occurs. It's an organizational leader who can demonstrate and understand empathy. That is a wonderful communicator in the context of being willing to listen and hear people out and understand people's meeting people where they are in the firehouse, being approachable. Vulnerability is a huge piece. I mean, I feel like I'm borrowing a lot here from Brene Brown, but those, it's funny. A friend of mine who's a deputy chief up in Gig Harbor, Scott Booth, we in the EFO program, they were saying soft skills, soft skills, soft skills, and he's like, I have a problem with that term. I was like, okay, what's the problem, right? He said that minimizes it. That makes it sound less than hard skills. He said, why don't we call it human skills? And it's like, man, that right there is brilliant. And I think that if we're training for and we're looking for command presence, we will find it. But if we also train for and look for and teach people what it is to be a resonant leader, to recognize, command presence, basically the declaration is I'm in charge. Whereas in the command resonance role, it's you can trust me. And that you have to develop both sides of that. It's not a binary where you either are command present. You need both. And more specifically, I need you as a company officer. I need you as a battalion chief to develop yourself in a way where you accountability isn't about punishing people and disciplining people. It's about investing in people. And if all you do is exhibit command presence, they're going to see discipline and accountability as a punishment versus you genuinely, authentically investing in them. And man, I feel like I could name drop a lot of people, and certainly on the front range, you got quite the talent pool out there. And Alec Otten over in Aurora, he said, and I love this, talking about, accountability and discipline, and he relates it to his children. And it's like when you discipline or hold your kids accountable, it's not because you hate them or you're mad at them it's because you love them, and it's because you want the best for them, and you want to correct their decisions, and you want to help them be better moving into the future. Parenting is I don't want to say we're parenting people, not at all. But if we can borrow that philosophy and understand that if people genuinely and authentically believe in us, believe in the fact that when we're correcting people, when we're holding people in the organization and ourselves accountable, it's not a punitive step. It's an investment, and we're trying to make you the best version of yourself in the leadership role. And I think command resonance is the stepping stone that gets us there.
You're right. It's not parenting. We're not treating them like children, but we should care for them like they are our children.
100%.
You kind of started to touch on it a little bit, that you develop this resonance long before the emergency incident, even a lot of times before you're maybe in the role. Can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe how up and coming officers, aspiring officers, or those currently in the position can start to build that command resonance?
Eric, yes, that's a brilliant question. I can answer it multiple ways. I can think back to my fire academy 25 years ago about leaders at the probationary level who were resonant. And they were the ones that authentically sat with you, looked you in the eye and said, "Hey, how are you doing? It's kind of rough today. How are you doing?" And they don't have to do that. But when they do that, they become credible to you because they showed interest. And that interest is like putting pennies in the jar. They're investments made over time. And that's how resonance works. It's not a one and done. It's not, wow, you commanded that fire really well. It's about those daily human interactions that happen. And I'll tell you, interestingly enough, we talked about it being lonely at the top. I have a very short list. I could count them on one hand, a number of company officers here in Meridian that will call or they will text me, and they'll say, "Hey, how are you doing, Chief? How are things going?" And that right there is a demonstration that they are and they possess the quality of being a command resonant leader. They know what they're doing, and it's not to gain favor. They genuinely and authentically care about people that are serving them. They understand that my job is to serve them, but they always also are willing to check in with me. And again, that right there, those are the people that I know that will pop into my office, shut the door, and just say, "Hey, I just want to let you know you're doing a good job, and how are you doing as a person?" And I mean, I get flustered. "No, everything's great," blah, blah, blah. No, they genuinely care, authentically. And then when you ask them the question, "How are you doing?" Well, since you asked, I've got this, that, or the other thing. Well, how can I help you? And so it's a mutually beneficial philosophy where people it's not about building friendships. It's about building credibility in our roles and being willing to be empathetic and vulnerable and listen and ask questions. show interest. All of those things are the things that stack up in the resonance category. Command presence, great. You can bark orders on a radio and you're tactically competent, and again, it is important. I don't want to be dismissive of how important that is, because I think we've probably all responded to that fire where there was either a company officer or a battalion chief like, "Oh my gosh, we're in trouble." And it's the franticness in their voice, it's the indecisiveness so that needs developed too. But I think we overdevelop that muscle at the expense of developing humans with human skills. Leadership is messy, and you brought that up, and leadership is a practice. We give grace to the medical field because we say they're practicing medicine, or lawyers, they practice law. No different. We're not going to get everything right. We shouldn't be expected to get everything right. But if we're vulnerable, authentic, we're not going to hide behind the position of command. We're going to be willing to say, you know what, I didn't get that right today. That wasn't my best effort. I could have done, and that builds that resonance model as well, is just being willing to admit that, hey, look, I'm practicing my leadership, and I know I'm not perfect. And our interactions are cumulative, and they build and they build. And when we're authentic, we become resonant with people.
And as you mentioned earlier, the command resonance only amplifies command presence. You can't maximize your command presence on an emergency scene if you haven't built this resonance on the forefront and built that trust ahead of time. And I think that that's where we sometimes struggle, is that it's either like all or nothing. It's either the emergency scene or it's off the emergency scene. Everything we do in operations is preparing for that emergency. And a lot of that's during that downtime as well. But what a great example of those, subordinates coming into your office. What a high level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, right? And I've got a few of those as well, and they kind of know when to do it too. It's not like they're just blindly coming in and they're the ones saying it all the time. Like, they know, they sense it, and I just think that that self-awareness is such a huge piece that so many people lack. And I love that story, and I think I'd love to kind of dip into accountability a little bit more, because we've already started to talk about it a little bit. And I think that's another area that maybe we haven't gotten 100% right in the fire service. We are here to motivate and get the best and the most out of people that we possibly can. So why aren't we doing it in a way that they are going to receive? And I think that, you talk a lot about communication throughout the book. And I really, really liked when you're talking about feedback and how to give feedback and how that is accountability. Accountability, I think that some of our people just assume that accountability is that kind of autocratic, I'm going to call out all the wrongs in the world, but I'm not going to tell you how to fix them. I'm just going to tell you you're wrong, and we create this culture of fear and all that sort of thing. What are your thoughts on what we've kind of gotten wrong about accountability, but how we can get it right in our fire service, especially from that company officer level?
Sure. Yeah, I think accountability is really there's three folds to that accountability paper. It's, people who are willing to be accountable to the organization, people that are accountable to and for their actions. But then also there's this notion of personal accountability, holding your own self to that standard. And that's very hard, to hold other people to a standard that you yourself don't exhibit. And certainly communication is at the crux of a lot of this accountability piece. And, somebody who only enforces rules, wow, great, you're a wonderful supervisor. But, a person who develops people is the leader, is the officer that we're looking for. And accountability is just a tool in the procession of development of our company officers and people as an individual. And again, I go back and say, personal accountability. It's, do you train? Do you exhibit all of these things? Do you do one thing, or do you say one thing and do another? I mean, those are all things that grow into this context, or this notion of accountability. And I honestly think that, accountability, organizational accountability is about the shared ownership of what the organization's standards are and what they stand for. And the pendulum of hyper accountability can be called micromanagement. And what people don't need to be is micromanaged. They just need to be held accountable. And in doing so, a lot of you know, a lot of organizational credibility is generated. And it's funny because I've often said, and I do believe this is true. Accountability is the antidote to chaos.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is if somebody does something that's immoral, illegal, unethical, broke the rules, broke the policy, we owe them as supervisors to hold them accountable, because when we hold people accountable, it gives that person, that individual, the opportunity to atone for whatever they've done. It's not fair to them to not hold them accountable, and that's a twofold path, because not holding them accountable doesn't allow them to grow and develop, and it shows that we don't care. Holding them accountable lets the organization know that that person did something that was not right. We'll just couch it as that. They were held accountable, and now they're able to move on. If we don't hold people accountable when they do things wrong, people are not able, this as well as I do, right? The people in the organization that just seem to get away with everything. And it's like, man, they're the Teflon Don. They get away with everything. They can't do this. I mean, the moment that they're held accountable, people are like, oh, dang, all right. All right. About time they were held accountable. And that gives that individual who's being held accountable credibility. It gives them the opportunity to correct and fix what was wrong and move forward. And so that's what I'm saying. It's a leadership paradox. By not holding people accountable, you're damaging the crew or the organization. You're damaging your own self's credibility, but you're also not giving that person the opportunity to atone for what they did wrong. Call it out, recognize it, paint it, and write it down, and allow them to move beyond that. And so that's why I really think that accountability does offer the opportunity to fix a lot of the small things before they become big things.
And that's what I was going to say. Yeah, before they become the big things, and I think that that's where a lot of times the company officer comes in. You've got an opportunity early on, because we've all had those situations where it just keeps getting, it gets passed off from one leader to the next, and then all of a sudden, then when somebody does try to do something about it 20 years later, it's a whole different story. And I think that the other difficult thing we have is because it's not all clean. We talked about it; it's messy. Uh, I think a lot of times our fire service or our membership would like to see, all these actions take place like broadcast live, like a C-SPAN congressional hearing or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And that's just not reality, right? And so we have to do our parts individually to just know that we are doing our job, and have those difficult conversations.
Hmm.
And I think that's another kind of fallacy. We've always talked about having the difficult conversations or those crucial conversations, and it's very true, but
Hmm.
how we have those conversations matters. I think that we've always had people that have had the conversations. One of the sections I really, really liked in your book was about accountability and giving feedback. Like there's some really, really actionable stuff in there. Just really encourage people to check it out. Your tips for making effective observations. Number one, be objective. Number two, be specific and be timely.
Hmm.
So true. And it's those things that I think people on the other end of that are receiving that are going to appreciate it. And it goes on to talk a little bit more about all areas of communication, of feedback, of accountability.
Yeah, well, and, Eric, real quick on that communication, what's really important is trying to create an organization that recognizes that communication doesn't happen necessarily or needs to be the fire chief down. You owe it as a member of any agency. You owe it to be willing to communicate up the chain of command. And the whole say from Saving Private Ryan, command or complaints go up the chain, not down, right? Well, the complaint, I don't want to call it a complaint, but the willingness to communicate is a choice between courage and cowardice. Like, you can sit at a fire station and be disgruntled and have opinions and thoughts and feelings, but if you're not communicating that, shame on you. And that's a damaging you are generating a damaging culture within your firehouse, because as a company officer, what you're doing is you're sowing seeds of hate and discontent and taking a cheap shot at morale, to, the rest of to that engine or truck company. And so if you're not courageous enough to go have a conversation with somebody, in my opinion, shut up or speak up. Maybe you can't fix everything, but if people aren't communicating with you and letting you know what the issues are, how in the world is anything going to get better? How in the world do you have an opportunity to fix it? And again, they see things from their level, and they're entitled to that, and they should be paying attention to things at their level. But if there's something that is not going right in the supervisory positions above them, and they're not willing to communicate it, shame on you.
Yeah, totally agree. It's on us as executive leaders to create the environment that allows that conversation to come up.
Sure,
But
sir, absolutely.
we need to hear it. We really do. I like to start to wrap up a little bit because you've been so generous here with your time, and just I could go on. I think we could go on for
Yeah.
hours
Oh,
on
yeah.
this. I
Great.
really appreciate the conversation. What uh what are some leadership behaviors that you see company officers maybe struggle with the most?
Probably, and it's funny asking that question, um, and to kind of dive back into that accountability piece. It's about a company officer recognizing that you're not just hanging out at the station with your boys and, guys and gals. You're that's not who you are anymore, and recognizing that is sometimes challenging, and so I think that it gets back to the challenge that they have is the consistency in the application of accountability, not discipline, but accountability. And I've seen it far too often. And I would be more than willing to fall on the sword and say, I too did this. It's, I just want to keep the peace. Hey, go along, get along. What do we need to do just to get through this shift, this set? And, hey, that's so and so just being so and so, being dismissive of all of the small little things that really do require your leadership at that company officer to step in and in whatever capacity and whatever context it is. But, it really is the daily small moments of cumulative accountability that I think at the company officer level gets neglected for the sake of just trying to be the nice guy or gal. And that certainly doesn't work long term. That will get used against you. That because now people don't have clear expectations. They don't know who's going to get held accountable to what. And you don't want to be that supervisor. You don't want to be that frontline supervisor where it's like, well, I don't know what we're going to get today. We may go drill until 10 p.m. or maybe it's a carton of ice cream in the rockin' locks all day. We have no idea what the standard is and what the expectation is. And so I think by holding, just keeping consistent with the accountability expectations, it really prevents the big things from happening. And I think that, just being methodical about how you do that and managing your crew, leading your crew with an accountable mindset is key. And I do think that that's where leaders struggle is because it's very easy and convenient just to kind of look past, well, they weren't wearing the right belt today, or and we could go down the path of the normalization of deviance and stuff like
Mhm,
that. But
mhm.
it's the allowance and not holding people accountable to things that I think creates the big problems long term.
Well, and leadership's just a plain grind sometimes as well. And we talked about it can get a little dangerous. Sometimes things happen to us that may not be completely fair. And you got to weather this storm. Do you have any kind of recommendations for leaders at all levels to weather the storm? Because it's not always easy. It doesn't always feel good.
Yeah.
I think that people have this idea of these all knowing leaders that are sitting on their perch with all the answers, and everything feels good all the time. And the bottom line is it doesn't. It's hard.
Mhm.
What What are your recommendations for leaders to just kind of stay persistent and weather that storm?
Man, oh boy, that's a great one. To borrow from Simon Sinek, you've got to be in touch with and never forget why you're doing what you're doing. And in many cases, you tested for this. You never forget there was a moment that all you wanted was what you have right now. And just recognizing and being able to kind of pull yourself out of separate. This is probably the key, I would say, Eric, and is you need to separate yourself from the role. This is no different than somebody acting in a movie or doing, this is not who you should be. Your role is not who you are. That's the job and the function that you're performing. And the reason that I say that is it's kind of giving you a little bit of separation of understanding that when people are frustrated and they're angry and they think that this is wrong and that's wrong, don't take it personal. It's business. And I've often said, and I think it's true, I've heard it from somebody else, and in leadership roles, if you wanted to be liked, go sell ice cream. And even then, maybe you're not going to have the flavor of ice cream somebody's going to like. So leadership is hard and it is a grind, but recognizing why you're doing what you're doing, and be reflective. Look at the wins that you've accomplished and the progress that your company has made. Hey, maybe you were doing an annual evaluation and you guys really didn't perform very well when it mattered, and you've been dedicated to making your crew perform at a very high level, and over a year or 18 months or 2 years, that's come to fruition. So be reflective, because again, I mean, it's very easy to get caught in the moment and to worry about what tomorrow is going to be all about. Look back, be reflective, and recognize that, it is a journey. There are ups and downs, there are peaks and valleys. Celebrate the peaks and grind through the valleys, because again, that's just what it is. And because, like, if you take this job personally, it'll kill you. It really will, because if you care, you can care too much. And I don't mean that to say you shouldn't care. You should
Mhm.
care, but you have to be willing to compartmentalize your role that you serve within your organization and who you are as a person. You know, don't shame on me. I sidelined my family for the first 4 years that I've been up. We took one vacation in 4 years. That's not fair to my family, because I'll tell you, the day I leave this job, my seat will be filled before my retirement announcement happens. And what did I do that for? At the end of the day, it's like I sacrificed time away from my family and all of these wonderful things for what? And at the end of the day, you've got to just make sure that your priorities stay correct. And this job will be fine without you. And so care while you're in the role, but make sure that you understand the difference between role and self. That would be my offering for sure.
Powerful. Thank you for that. Anything else that we missed or that you'd like to highlight from your book, or just think is important for people to know before we wrap up here, Kris?
Not really, Eric, but you really did kind of lead in very well with well, I should say it this way. I'm glad that the book landed for you the way that it did, and you see it for what it is. It is very much mosaic. The intent of it is for it to live on the desk, not on a bookshelf, and yours. I'm so again, it's an ego stroke, because the way that your book represents the best of what I hope for a fire service member to use it as. And what I mean by that is it is relevant to a firefighter, and it is relevant to a fire chief and everyone in between, and not all at the same time. You may want to flip through, and, oh, you know what? Chapter 16 is relevant to me as a firefighter. Oh, and stoicism, that's relevant from fire chief to firefighter. So it's not a linear book. It's meant to be very mosaic. It's like, find what you need. Hopefully it's in there. And hopefully it's just the sharing of ideas in a different way than you may have heard them otherwise. So I really appreciate the plug, and I appreciate your passion about it. It certainly it's a heck of an experience to go down that road. So and it is a bit of vulnerability to while you're practicing leadership, write about leadership, because writing about it is pretty darn easy in the context or the relationship to practicing leadership. It's dangerous, it's challenging. And again, thank you very much. I love this Ops Talk platform. I love what you're doing with it, and I see this as a great investment that you're making in the Westminster Fire Department. So good on you, sir.
Yeah, I just appreciate you giving us a chance and coming on. And I think this book is just invaluable for those that I think everybody should get it. I think every firefighter should get it, but especially those aspiring for leadership or already in a leadership role. Like I said earlier, it's very, very scalable. The lessons apply regardless of what position you're in. Use it to prepare for a promotional process, but also use it while you're in the job. So many lessons, and we could do a whole nother episode just on my curiosity about how you balanced all this and how you wrote this book. And I know you're still super involved in the industry. I believe you were working on a doctorate at one time. You're a fire chief in a busy, growing area. Like I don't know how you pull it off, but it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, well, you're too kind.
So I've been taking a few notes along the way. I know I didn't capture everything, but to recap a little bit, we all have influence, whether that's within our organizations and maybe outside within the fire service. Appreciate that influence. So appreciate the influence you have on other people. Really, those company officers have the ability to really make or break a career and make or break the way people feel about themselves and a crew operates as well. We're all responsible for culture. It's not as easy as just talking about it, and strive to be that mission-driven culture. Everything should be based on the mission. We're going to make mistakes along the way. We need to allow those mistakes. We need to empower, but we also need to understand responsibility, and responsibility goes two ways. Command resonance does not replace command presence. Command resonance amplifies command presence. Accountability is multifaceted, and it's on all of us. We all play a role in accountability. It goes all different directions. Communication goes up and down. It's not a one-way street. And it's, you know what, in the end, it's going to be hard, but this job is worth it. When it starts to get tough, remember why you came here in the first place. Remember why you do it, and it's totally worth it. As we talk about it in EFO constantly, sometimes we need to step away and maybe get on that balcony and gain that perspective. So, Kris,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you back your time. I just appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate all of those that have come on to listen or watch this show. Remember, it's available on YouTube. It's available on all your major podcast platforms. If this has been of any benefit to you, please consider giving it a like, a follow, subscribe, share the podcast to others that might find it beneficial. If you have ideas for future episodes, you can email opstalk.wfd@gmail.com. Open to any suggestions, questions, follow-up. And we've got some good ones coming up. This one's going to kind of kick off our officer development series. Got an episode coming up where we're going to pull the curtain back on our lieutenant positions, our captain positions, and some of our other leadership roles. Got a lot planned for you. Thanks for joining us.